Hello and welcome to Sounding Board, a community access television production of Seroptimus International of Novato. My name is Madeline Peters, and my guest today is Heather Selick, and her topic is Kids Can't Wait. But before I have Heather introduce herself a little bit more, I'd like to provide a little background on Seroptimus. Seroptimus International is, as its name suggests, an international organization. It's a global, it's throughout the world, and its mission is serving women and girls, helping advance the status of women and girls. So Heather, thank you very much for taking time to be here. It's really a privilege and a pleasure to have you come here. And your topic is on Kids Can't Wait. But there's also you, who's Heather, and your own background. I know you have a rich and varied background, so I'd like to take an opportunity to have you share something about your background, and then of course your own arrival story to your focus on kids.
Well, thanks for having me here, Madeline. I really appreciate it. I am interested in education. I started my career as a teacher, and I taught for about 5 years and found it a little bit isolating for me and went right into filmmaking, a logical decision, I know. So I went into filmmaking, went to UCLA grad school, and ended up going into animation. I loved it for many years. I started out as an artist, went to be a producer because of all my education when I was teaching the students. It felt like my crews were my students, and I just was in heaven for a long time.
So you were able to match your teaching skills with this whole new career.
A lot of the skills were similar, believe it or not.
Oh, wow.
So then, at a certain point, it lost its glamour for me, and my husband and I had 2 boys, and I decided to spend time at home and return to education.
Okay.
And
so
I ended up
education, career in film, back to education.
And I chose special education, because both of our sons needed services. They were diagnosed pretty late, maybe around 5th grade.
So 5th grade, that's about 9 or 10 years old.
As having ADHD.
So that's attention
deficit hyperactivity disorder.
Okay.
They were lacking pretty much in the hyperactivity component, but they had all the other issues that went along with it, and it involved organization, planning, and I think that, you know, coming around full circle to this really brought home the need for parents' participation in the educational system.
Well, how did your kids do then? You know, like you said, they were in 5th grade. So,
well,
what was their early experience? What was your early awareness or insight?
When I was a parent and wanting to be involved in the schools, I volunteered, like a lot of parents do. I was in the classrooms. I was a class parent. We would help put on parties for the kids. You know, I would grade math papers. And I started noticing that, let's start with our first son. He's 22 now. The other one's 15 now. I started noticing that there were things that weren't adding up for me. I would see that he was daydreaming. I would see that he often left his material scattered. I just started picking up on things that were different than the other children. And
so it was like your observation of your own child within the setting of other same age children.
And that was, I think, my first clue. And honestly, we noticed that at the get-go. We saw it in pretty much kindergarten and 1st grade. And what brought me to special education and to study it was because I was trying to understand what I missed. How did my conversations with the teachers, and I love teachers. I was a teacher, my mother was a teacher. I come from a line of teachers, but I didn't understand what they were telling me, and I couldn't put two and two together to see that I needed to intervene and help my child. Mm-hmm. And I lost a lot of time in that process. And that's where I came up with what I'm calling this talk, Kids Can't Wait. Mm-hmm. You don't have time to wait it out to see if they're going to maybe advance or if they're going to develop to keep up with the other students. Outgrow.
That's the catchphrase.
Right.
I remember hearing.
Right, that they're going to outgrow their issues. You really can't wait. You really should address them. And since I've studied the subject now, I know how to address them. I know what to do. And my position right now is that parents need to assume the responsibility of being equal partners in their child's educational process.
Well, it seems as though, I don't know, just watching the nature of interaction, that maybe one assumes that that's already happening. Are you suggesting that
I'm suggesting that it's not. That as a parent, if a teacher tells you that, well, let's just wait and see, you're tempted to think, oh, good, there's nothing wrong. This is a natural part of development, especially for someone who hasn't gone through this before. But it's really, let's wait to see if they fail. And it's often called now wait to fail. You don't want your child to get to that position.
It's too late.
It's too late. They become, their self-image diminishes. They are not confident. They start having behavior problems. They become,
maybe experience depression.
Right, right. And really, when they're very young, maybe up until like 3rd grade or so, if they're causing disruptions and if there are behavior problems, I bet you could trace them back to inabilities to read or to do math or to keep up with the class. At that age, children really do not want, they want to please you.
Yes, yes.
They really want to succeed. They want to be pleasing you. They want to fit in.
They want to be just like everyone else.
They do. They do. And if you notice that your student's not, that's the time to intervene. That's the time to identify why.
And what is it that you mean by intervene as a parent or a guardian?
What I mean is that it's a good idea to keep records, to see and note everything that you've seen going on. And what you can do, there's several things you can do, but the main thing you can do is request an assessment from your school. And if you do request an assessment, they're obligated to respond to you. So one of the main things you can do is write a letter to your principal in your school and tell them what your concerns are. You would spell them out, having kept a record of your child's work and why you're concerned, and you'll request an evaluation.
So that you send the letter to the principal and you're documenting
and
what you've seen, and you have
valid reasons.
Okay. You're serious about some serious issues.
Yes.
And then you start the process that way.
Yes. And with the IDEA, which is Individuals with Disabilities Educational Act, it's specified that the schools are required to respond to you within 15 days, and they're also required to do the assessment within 60 days if they're going to go ahead and do the assessment and not contest that it's unwarranted. So that's a very strong, powerful tool, and they do it for free. There should be no cost to the parent. And once the parent has an identifier, something that can be pointed out where the child might be having trouble, it's actually possible to do something about it.
So that this becomes extremely critical, making these connections.
It does, yes.
You know, when you see them, is helpful because it could lead to services that may correct or may strengthen the child's abilities.
And the younger you do it, the more likely it is to be effective.
Well, those flexible brains in
That's
those young
right.
children.
That's right. And what we find is that the earlier it's done, the more effective it is, not only in the process of maybe reading if someone has dyslexia, but it's also much better for them behaviorally. And it's much better for their self-confidence, and it's easier to correct. So that's a really important point. Now, one of the things I'd like to say is that the interest, and both my boys, as I said, had ADHD, the inattentive form, and along with a few other items. But I'm interested in the mild, moderate types of issues. The kids who fall through the cracks, the ones who might not be obviously suffering from one of the major issues in special ed, like blindness, or one of the more obvious ones. Yes, the catastrophic kind of difficulties.
So what is it so this category, mild, moderate, can you elaborate on that a little?
Well, most of them are in the category of specific learning disabilities.
Okay.
And most of those disabilities are processing ones. And
by processing, what does that mean?
What you mean by processing? How your brain absorbs information.
Okay.
So what you've got is, does it absorb it auditorially? It could be an auditory processing disability. It could be a visual. It could be the main categories in this area are dyslexia, which is understanding the way your brain processes language.
Okay.
There's dyscalculia.
Dyscalculia,
which is math.
Okay.
And understanding math and numbers. And there's dyspraxia, which is a physical issue of the muscle coordination. And there's also ADHD often falls in this category, as does sometimes Asperger's, and executive functioning. So
executive functioning, what is that?
Yes, executive functioning is actually a component of ADHD, and what it is the portion of the brain that controls your time management, your organization, or what they call the executive of your brain, the person who organizes things, plans things. And with each one of these, because we've known about them for many years, there have been documented techniques to address these issues.
So that you could take all of these different things that you're talking about.
If you identify
it. As long as you know specifically where the
breakdown is.
Perfect. Where the breakdown is, then there's a corresponding approach.
There are techniques to tutor, to bring someone along, to remediate it. So I just think that in the schools as they are now, they're underfunded. We all know that teachers are overworked and underpaid. They try very hard with pretty large classrooms, even if it's 24 students. That's a lot of students. And for all their trying and for all the good work, your student, if it's not really a problem for them, might actually their problems might not be addressed. So
here's a teacher with 24 and up students in a class. And if you have a child who's perhaps not acting out or something like that,
the quiet one,
they could end up sort of disappearing and not getting the attention they need to help their learning.
And these days with the internet, you really can learn a lot of what you need to know as a parent. You need to know the jargon that the teachers use, which are really education terms. Many of them are acronyms or letters that form a word, or they're just initials for things, but it's not that hard to find out what's being talked about. You can, if somebody said to you FAPE, you might say, what's that? So free, appropriate public education. Right.
So what you're saying is then is really important for the parent. I mean, you come with the education, teacher education, you're a business person, then more teaching and involvement. And so you've educated yourself, but what you're saying is it's important for the parent to become the parent, caregiver, guardian.
The parent and guardian.
To learn the language.
To learn the language. If you're going to a foreign country, you learn the language. If someone was going to be a lawyer, they would learn legal language.
Yes.
And that's what you need to do here. And it is very easily accessible. You need to learn the language, you need to learn your rights. And mostly, you need to know your child. And you need to know what is going on with my student. What is it that is their strength, and what is it that's their weakness, and try to find out how to help them.
So, but one of the things that you said a little bit earlier is, just paying attention to what you see, samples of your child's work.
Right.
So that's suggesting, if parents, guardians have a concern that record keeping is really, really important. Could you speak to that a little bit?
The schools have only limited resources, and I think that parents should always be accumulating the actual work that's done in the classroom. The schools will have a record of report cards, but you will have the writing samples. You will have a development over the year of how your child has progressed. You can see their math work, and if you just keep it and put it in a box, I think that's the best thing that a parent can do, disability or no disability. You just keep your students' work, and if it comes to a point where you're suspecting something and would like to request an assessment, then you will bring it out and you can prove your case.
You have your data.
You have your data, right, and that's exactly what you need. It's very easy to have a box that you just put this kind of thing in.
It might be helpful then to make sure that these...
Everything should be dated.
Dated.
Yeah, everything should be dated. I knew someone once that had a stamp, and she would just use that stamp and stamp everything that came in the house.
But you can see how important that is. It's like a portfolio. It's really a snapshot in a different way than, say, your words or your child's words can create. It's, things are
And we are
visual.
a data-driven society.
We are.
You're right.
We are.
We want to see that something's true and proved, and we want to make sure that we're doing the right thing for the child. So we want to assess them in the correct area.
So the parent awareness, parent collecting data, understanding and acting on something that's sort of a gut feeling how something is, and I can understand all of that that's sort of the preparation or the foundation. There's an issue here, there may be an issue here, we need to look at this a little bit more closely. But you also talked about, the nature of the relationship parents and guardians have with the teachers.
With the schools. And they need to have a positive working relationship. I feel that occasionally and often it becomes adversarial, and you have to do everything you can to keep it on the right track and work with the teacher. And that teacher knows, from years of experience what is typical for a student, and they can be your very best ally. They can help you in ways every day they're with your student. And that can be a blessing or that can be a disaster.
Well, it's the two most significant people in a child's life are the child's parents, guardians,
and their teachers. And the other thing about keeping a record of the student's work is that you as a parent and guardian have the big picture, the long view. And you'll find that from the birth through, the rest of their lives. You're with them. And teachers, for all their experience, they kind of plug in at a certain point. So you'll have 12 different, not 12, probably 25 different teachers by the time a student graduates from high school. And each one of them will need to get to know your student. And it's so terrific when you can meet with them and tell them what has worked in the past, how they learn, and that's for the younger years. As soon as your student can speak for themselves, that's what you want.
So there's a shift then.
Self-advocacy.
You want that?
Yes.
Okay, so what age are you talking about there?
Middle school. Middle
Okay.
school is when
Well,
you
that's-
really begin
Right.
self-advocacy.
That's also when children don't want to admit they have parents anyway.
They don't. But you know, I think that just judging from my own experience, my children were grateful that they were learning and with the group and everything was working for them. At the time, they became aware of how they learned and what they needed to do.
So they appreciated your...
And I did have to, sometimes towards the end of high school with my older one, we would have a meeting and I would be told, Mom, this is my meeting. And
Wow.
I would, and I, you know, that's what you want.
Of course.
You want your student, you know, in understanding who they are and being able to speak for themselves.
Well, to me that represents that they understand. In psychology, there's like the internal locus of control or
Right.
external locus of
Right.
control. And as a child, children need help. They need the
They need
guidance. But then as they develop, they need the awareness that they're in charge, that they have,
And that this is,
they can make a difference in their own lives, but they have to advocate for themselves.
and I'm not by any means suggesting that you hover around your children, protect them, and diagnose
Isn't that
them.
what we all do?
No, I'm not suggesting that. I'm suggesting that you make it possible for your child to succeed.
Sure.
And that is a huge difference to me. Oftentimes, when you get to high school, you'll find that you are no longer able to be the one who helps them organize. It will be a tutor. It might be somebody else on the outside, a friend, if you can't get them to, you know, because there's tension between parents as they start breaking away.
Well, it's like your child wants some independence from you.
Oh, yeah.
It's like they're
Yeah,
very
absolutely.
dependent at birth, and they spend their lives establishing their independence.
Right.
So I can see that it's important to understand, for a parent to understand when it's time for someone else.
That's why, for all the reasons, you have to do it now. When you start seeing something and you're in the kindergarten class and you realize, hey, my child can't really hold a pencil, you know, maybe I could do a little bit of work with that, or you need to address it early, because that is the only time when you have influence, when they're interested in really pleasing you. And
that's a good
really,
way to put it too.
Yeah, they are. And they're going to grow, they're going to become more self-aware, they're going to want to push you away, and at that point you want to make sure that they don't head off to college, as has happened with many people, and not be able to really navigate on their own. So you want them to be successful as they leave your care. And you've got to look at the transitions. You know,
The transitions from like elementary school to middle school
Right.
to high school to whatever
they decide to do,
after high
whether they're
school.
going to go into a college, a four-year, a community school, whatever they're going to do, or trade. Your child has to become themselves. And I look at these things and I think these are not necessarily disabilities. They're the way the child learns. You know, they're just not an auditory learner. They somehow, their processing, their memory is not so great to copy down from the board. And once you identify what it is, there are so many workarounds that are just so simple that because you learn this way, I'd love to get away from the word disability, but because you learn this way, you have this support.
Wow. We are just about out of time.
Oh.
The conversation's always just zip
Keep
by.
going.
If people want to contact you for more information,
Yes.
they can contact you at
heather.selick@gmail.com.
Okay.
And that's SELICK.
Okay, only one L. Only
One L. Right.
Well, Heather, thank you very much for taking the time to have a conversation with me, and I really appreciate your being here and continuing that we continue our conversation.
Thank you, Madeline. I appreciate that.
Okay. Today's program is Sounding Board, a community access television production of Seroptimus International of Novato. I'd like to thank Heather Selick for taking the time to be here and be the guest. I'd also like to thank Seroptimus Club members who serve as crew, and also Novato Public Access Television members who make this program possible. My name is Madeline Peters. Thank you.